Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. Today's guest is Frank Andersen, head of Transactional Services at Idwal. For those that don't know, Idwal is a global leader in vessel inspections, benchmarking. Idwal has recently launched Idwal ID, a comprehensive condition improvement program. The digital platform delivers defect management, fleet analytics, and benchmarking through detailed ship inspections and reports through dynamic data. We get to talk about this, Frank's journey in the maritime space, as well as what the future hold. Frank, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to it. I think we spoke a little bit before we got going. Idwal's been always kind of interesting to me because I really think that they've kind of taken something that people do. Not a lot of people know that they do it. In other words, pre-sale inspection. And not only are good at that, but then starting to digitalize it a little bit. Talk a little bit about the latest that's going on and a little bit kind of your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Chris, I started, many years ago in shipping with AP Moller Maersk, where I spent, my young childhood in short pants and 25 years of operations, where I took me around to Tokyo, Hong Kong, Holland, Singapore. So I've been spending 20 years in Asia, dealing with shipping, operational and commercial. Following that, I went to Klaveness in 2011, and with Klaveness, that's where I got this interest in the digitalization of shipping. That was kind of where the Uber of this world came in. And we were sitting there in Klaveness and saying, okay, Uber is going in and totally disrupting the taxi industry without having any assets, without having any knowledge about transporting people, without having any certificates. But they just go in there with an app and kind of disrupt. So we said, we need to disrupt ourselves because we sit here in Klaveness. We got the money, we got the customers, and we got the knowledge about the business. So that's where my interest started in digitalization and how can we in shipping do things differently. And that's obviously what later we in the management team, we started having Google sprints, trying to find out, small little projects. We had a saying saying, try a little, learn a lot, and it was kind of pushed a little bit of money after a project and see what we learned from it. And we decided to have a small little internal competition. The one who came up with the best idea would get some support to do a trial or do a proof of concept. And that kind of inspired me to say, there is a lot to be done in shipping when it comes to digitalization. And that's kind of where it brought me from 30 plus years in very commercial operational shipping into something completely different, you can say.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to talk about that part of the journey because I kind of, well, firstly, the first part, which is interesting, is Klaveness, like a lot of other companies, what I've been hearing and learning and understanding about, do have this, I think they call it intrapreneurship instead of entrepreneurship. So it's this whole idea of we have this really great base of knowledge. Yeah, we're going to have to farm out some of, let's say now it's like AI learning and other things. Okay. But usually those companies have to come to a subject matter expert. We have the hard part, which is a subject matter expert. Why not try to do something? And I'm hearing other companies, you seeing this a little bit also on the technical manager side. I believe there's a few companies, I think Bernard Schulte is big, some other companies that are doing that exact sort of thing.
And I think synergy a lot with the cooperation with the Maersk outfit.
Yeah. And Maersk as well, right? Maersk, especially on the tanker side, they're starting to do a lot more things. You're seeing some spin-offs from them. I think that's really kind of interesting. And that's certainly big change in the mindset, right? Talk a little bit about kind of how that went down internally, especially you embraced that change. A lot of people don't.
No, and that's right. I mean, I've now been, walking the digital space in shipping for quite some years now, and you see shipping being very fragmented when it comes to digital adoption. You have high class big shipping companies who really adopt technologies and digitalization, and then you have someone who basically never got started on that journey. So there's a huge gap between the lowest adapter and the highest adapter, where, if you look at logistic industries, you look at the airline industries, you look at the banking industry, if you don't adapt, you don't win and you don't make money. For some reason, shipping have been still being able to get away with not adapting technology to the same extent throughout all players. But I think what I have seen with a kind of great joy is that this whole decarbonization journey that we have to take and we are all on have made the shipping industry collaborate in many different ways that we haven't seen before. When I started as young in shipping, everybody was in for themselves and they didn't really want to talk to anybody else. They didn't want their information to go out to anybody else. They didn't want to share anything. Whereas now it's kind of this decarbonization journey have actually made people think we cannot do it alone. We need to help each other. We need to find out what technologies are available, what kind of new fuels is available. How do we make sure these new fuels are available in the ports where we call, the whole infrastructure around the new fuels? So I think that's very interesting. And, when I was working with ShipFix, actually, we were, going out saying, listen, your data is going to be shared with the rest of the people on our platform. And the people said, no, we don't think we like that. And then once you start having that dialogue, say, listen, either you sit with your own data on an isolated island and do whatever you can with those data, or you join the data pool of the smart guys, and then you get even smarter because you have more data to take your decisions upon. So now you're in the club or you're outside the club. What's your choice? And most people said, better be in the club than being outside the club. So there's a big change where shipping said, I don't want to tell anybody about anything I do. To maybe I can actually be smarter, and we can all be smarter if we help and share each other's data and knowledge. And that was when I worked with Klaveness, was exactly what we were doing with the Klaveness pools in the dry cargo market, was exactly that. One thing is you shared income and you shared risk and upsides, but it was also sharing, how do you operate? How do you make sure how can you slow steam your ship, which was very much on the forefront at that time, how do you do that? And they could help each other, the technical departments between the partners in the pool could. And I see that developing more and more from I started in shipping till today, for sure.
I think one of the things that you just brought up at the end there is the siloing of data within and own companies. And that is, the technical department had their data, chartering had their, ops has theirs. And I feel even within that, that's gotten better. But I had an experience a while back where, the technical department was completely shut off from chartering. No, we don't want you sitting in on meetings. Nope, you don't need to do that. And it was like, I sensed an underlying culture of almost fear that I would know what was going on and go run to the boss when all I just wanted to know is if a ship got put out a date that it's accurate. I don't, maybe there was an oversight and whoops, we should have gotten that part in Houston and we got to wait and now it's going to be delayed. Fine. Like frankly, I didn't care about that. What I cared about is to know that if the ship is going to be put out on June 1st, or a lot of times it was a pool partner that was putting the ship out on June 1st, that it was actually June 1st, that it was not commercially available June 10th because people are hiding behind stuff. And I think that people had that inherent fear. And I know that was just internal. That wasn't even external. That was internal. So you had to overcome those internal barriers before you can get to external barriers of sharing information. And I think the other point to that, I'm curious to hear what you think. I think it's also people hear sharing information and they automatically go to the most common denominator of important, critical commercial information. And I think that what you can share is important, but maybe not necessarily critical or unique, but maybe stuff that will get out anyway, or is getting out, but just in fractured pieces and it being put together and maybe for a common good. And I'm thinking about, post-fixture operational details shared between an owner and a charterer. And I'm sure you run into a lot of that, trying to explain that difference to people.
No, absolutely, and I think that's the biggest one of the big challenges in shipping is that the entire ecosystem is not working together. I was with Wärtsilä for a period of time, and they were trying to do this project, Smart Port, where they wanted to make sure that everybody was working together. The ship arrived in time for the berth. It didn't have to sit out, wait for 7 days, and burn fuel. Could save fuel sailing and being there exactly when it was able to berth and being discharged. The whole challenge around that model was how do we share the savings that we get by sailing slower, save fuel? How do we share that with all the stakeholders in that entire ecosystem? And my hope and wish is that hopefully we will get there. We get smarter with the data collection, we get smarter with artificial intelligence and machine learning. We will be able to somehow find a model that works, so that everybody benefits. Climate benefits, each individual stakeholders will benefit from a much more optimization of how do we do things back and forth.
You bring up a little bit about AI and MI, and I want to talk a little bit about that in the terms of just backing up even to the beginning, where you are today with your product and ship inspection and making it digital. When you talk to people about it, it seems pretty a pretty fairly simple concept. How are people receptive to this or not? And then what are you guys looking to do in the future, especially around AI and MI around this particular product and stuff? Because it has to bring up a lot of not only pain points, but I almost call them like the opposite, like worry points, like, oh, is this going to take away my job? So I'm really curious to see kind of where you are with the product, as and how it relates to when you go out and try to sell it and talk to the folks there.
No, absolutely, Chris. I mean, if we look at Idwal, we have inspected more than 10,000 unique ships since 2019, and we have inspected about. Last year, we did about 45% of the ships that were sold in the market had an Idwal grade, which is obviously the way we basically give the ship a grade and how good condition it is, and then we'll compare it to peers in the market of similar size, similar age, similar build, and things like that. And obviously, with so much data we have in our system, and when we inspect a ship, we collect over 600 data points. We look at over 600 different things. So if you have 10,000 unique inspections and 600 data points on each ship, you can imagine the amount of data that is there. And then if we start using those data and saying, okay, ships from this particular shipyard in this particular segment, and these are the common deficiencies that we see from this particular ship. So for this particular shipyard, these are the common things that is a challenge. These, there's corrosion to all these places in the same ships. That makes us able to kind of help existing owners saying, these type of ships, traditionally we show these kind of deficiencies. If we then take that next step further, and that's where we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning, is we say, okay, on that basis, we know so many ships, we can then predict a grade. So today we can now basically predict an Idwal grade, so a condition status of a ship that we haven't seen, because we use then our algorithm, and of course we use all the data we have from similar ships, from similar yards, similar ship managers, similar trades and stuff like that. And then we can actually start predicting grades, which means we can start doing a screening of a ship even without seeing it. And then the owners can say, okay, I have 20 ships, 10 of them seems to be screening a little bit below what I wanted to be on an Idwal grade. Let's go look at them physically and see what we can do to improve them. So it's basically, instead of going inspection right away, we start with a desktop screening, then we can dig deeper into that screening, then you could do a physical inspection, then you can add to the physical inspection your ESG, condition adjusted value for the ship, and these kind of things. So we kind of start to be able to offer different level of products depending on, where are you in a stage of either buying or maintaining or selling your ship.
That's really fascinating, because it can almost give a starting point of, for somebody who's looking to sell and say, we got a little bit of improvement because we may be a little bit undervalued, or let's sell now because we did do this work to move our grades up to, let's say, a more acceptable standard where we would get market or above. What was the reception as you started to roll this type of things out to the people that you would sell this to? I assume it's the finance guy, maybe the tech guy. What was their reaction as you started to say we could start doing this?
Obviously, also the shipbrokers, the buyers and sellers of ships. People are very excited about it. Obviously, there's a concern to how precise are we, and then of course we give a range, and we can call it an estimated grade. But our experience right now is we're relatively close with all the data we have. So there can be outliers, as we know with data, but in general we're pretty close to what we estimate on what it actually. So we obviously have backtracked our model and see, how would that have done with other existing ships. So there is kind of an interest and an adoption in the market. Say, yeah, we would love to have that tool easily available. And again, you have this discussion, do I have good ships? Do I have bad ships? And people get a little bit upset if the grade is not
Oh
exactly what
yeah,
they
I
want.
would imagine. I would imagine that gets contentious, especially there's a lot of like I remember in my broking days there was a lot of owners who, I mean, good for them. They took pride in their ships, and one of the things that was a bellwether change in the market was when the 15-year mark became kind of a badge of
Yeah.
no go. And there was a lot of ship owners who kind of took exception to that, who said, wait a minute, I've maintained my ship to high oil company standards, very high standards for 15 years. And you're going to tell me 15-year and day one, you can't use me?
Yeah.
You've just used me for 15 years. You know my ship. You know my crew. Like I go the extra mile. You asked me to put these safety features on my ship during a yard. I don't ask you for a dime. And now you're telling me. So I wonder, like, I can see a lot of people who have a massive amount of pride in their ships, because for a lot of people, it's not just an asset. It's an extension of them. So I imagine when you come in, and you say, well, maybe this is a little less, that you get a little pushback politely.
No, of course we do, but we also spend a lot of energy and time on the ships. We spend a lot of energy with taking the pictures. We have a huge quality control team sitting in Cardiff who will go through, ask questions to the surveyor if there's something that is unclear. So I think this year we will probably inspect about 4,000 ships. So we have a certain routine. We have seen ships before. We know what the issues are. We know what to do, and we take pictures. So yeah, people have a pride, but in principle, we need to be very objective and very neutral. Yeah. This is how it looks. This is our concern. And obviously then they can say, okay, but we have actually looked at and we will repair that. Okay, we'll put in a report that the seller is intending to repair this. That's fine. But we tell them what we see, and we support that with documents, with class records, with port state controls, with pictures. It's hard to get around. I mean, there might be one tweaky little thing that people don't like, but in general, it's very hard to get around. This is what it is.
It is. And you're talking about photos and things like that. One of the advents and one of the changes that we've seen, I think, in technology, and certainly it's being used on ships, is using closed caption television and other types of technology like that to predict an accident or predict other things. In that same thing, does that help you as well? Are you guys using, or you don't want to give away the farm, but are you seeing that evolution within what you're doing as well, where maybe it's not CCTV, but scanning pictures and other things, using that with, to get a deeper, more thorough understanding of where the ship is at?
Yeah, for sure. And then there is, we're looking at developing models that actually go in, machine learning and artificial intelligence, take the report and the pictures and start figuring out, what do I think as a computer and artificial intelligence? What do I think? And that could be kind of initial output to our customers saying, okay, this is what we have observed. This is what pictures we're taking. This is what the computer thinks. And then we will then say 2 days later, we'll have a person who have been on a ship and be sailing for many years and know what's going on, take a look as well. And then we'll see what it comes out. So we could speed up the process of an evaluation of the report by using machine learning, artificial intelligence. But again, we are in a space now, Chris, as you know, where it's running so fast that our minds, even you and me, who is in that space, say, "What is that really possible? And is that going to happen, or is that happening?"
Right. Or did that happen and we just missed it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And let alone everybody else who's not day-to-day working in this space.
Right. Yeah.
So it is, we can do it, and we can do it, but we need to get, the customers along and the journey, and so they also feel comfortable and feel safe about how we do it.
Yeah. Our customers, are you getting the reaction that there's a level of fear of people taking their jobs? Because you just outlined a really interesting workflow, and it sounds like it's in early stages of getting a report, running it through your algorithm, which is AI, MIAI, and then passing that on to the client, but with a comment like, we will still have human eyeballs on this to give a more refined approach. Are you finding people are getting a little nervous, or does this just allow whether it's the inspectors, whether it's you, whether it's the companies who are inspecting ships saying, wow, well, wait a minute, I can inspect more ships now. I could rely on some of this in the buy sell process versus, oh my God, they're taking my job. Where do you kind of see this? Where do you see the mindset in all this?
Well, it's early days for us in this technology, but I think, in general, if you look at a lot of the customers we have, if we more, not so much on the transactional side where I'm sitting, where it's about doing sale and purchase inspections, pre-sale and pre-purchase inspections or pre-finance inspection. But, if you look at the more conditional based inspections, you see a lot of owners who doesn't have enough people to inspect the ships enough. I mean, there is a requirement that the ship manager have to at least be on board his own ship at least once a year, but that's probably not enough. So we work with clients who said, we do not have enough resources to see all our ships as often as we want to. Or you have a number of ship owners who have outsourced the ship management totally. And they might have one or two technical guys sitting in the organizations having to oversee whatever 50 or 100 ships. They are also not able to look at all those ships. So that's where we go in with our ID platform to say, you can put your inspections into our platform. You can have an overview, and you have somebody to help you do that job. It's not that we're going to take all their jobs. We're going to help you do that.
Right, and then that makes that could actually spawn new industries or new layers or new companies. I think there's an interesting kind of thread here to pull that this could actually enhance a business or create a business where maybe it was something a little bit less approachable in the past.
No, absolutely. And, we use local inspectors in different countries and different ports. And, we have an outreach of over 100 different countries. All those are screened by our, inspection team, surveyor management team. And they're trained, they have our standards, they have our questionnaires, it's all in an Inselink very, very, very strong system. And, obviously we can go on board ships very quickly in every port, on most ports in the world. You save having to take your superintendent out of his job for 2 or 3, 4, 5 days to travel to somewhere. And then, we obviously pride ourselves to be carbon neutral. So, this guy also don't have to pollute because he doesn't have to fly. He doesn't, So there's a lot of elements built into the efficiency of swiftness and also the whole environmental thing that, we use the local people to do it. And then we have a system where we screen and make sure it's of a high quality and a consistent quality.
I think that's a really interesting part, and that's the ESG part, because, as people start to look at it, that starts to add up. And if you can document, like, well, if a technical manager or somebody could say, listen, we've actually, by using this platform, we can actually decrease your carbon footprint, especially as they start to look at the scope 3, because I would imagine this falls under your scope 3 type, not related, but in the world.
Yeah.
I think it definitely becomes a really interesting point. And I think that you kind of talked about it earlier about decarbonization and sharing of information. I think decarbonization is driving a lot of digitalization in a lot of different ways. Have you seen in your career, that change and kind of what would you be your big takeaway? Because I think it's pretty fascinating to see someone like yourself, similar mindset. Like I was on the commercial side. I mean, I sailed, I was on the commercial side. And then, about 6 years ago, I was like, well, I've kind of run my course here. This is a lot of stuff happening. I have an interesting worldview, and, let me just run with it. What do you kind of take away from that there?
No, but it's interesting. I started my technology journey in shipping in fuel efficiency companies about, how do we make ships more fuel efficient and how do we measure and where do we find out where the energy goes. And in the beginning, you could go in and say, I promise you 5% savings in fuel. You just have to invest, whatever, 50,000 US. And people say, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, that's 2 days of fuel savings.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe you. And then, you were running around and everybody's saying, no, we don't believe you. But if you look at the environment today, everybody's putting, special paint on their ships. They put on docks, they put on this and propellers, and they do everything now because and even people start putting sails on their ships. So people know now. So they have learned that actually, yes, there are savings. Yes, can we save 10 or 15%? No, but it's at least savings, and it's sufficiently savings, especially with the bunker price that it is today, that pays us back pretty quickly because that's what my experience in technology and shipping have learned me as or taught me, if it's not a payback quick, it's not worthwhile doing. And I think you have similar experiences. It needs
Yeah,
to. It needs
yeah, you got to have that quick payback. But I do think I had a guest on, Scott Bergeron from Ollendorf, and he said
Mm,
something really interesting. He said, we talked a lot about technology and adaptation, and he was like, well, I think ship owners do want to adapt it, but given like the nature of shipping and everything, you have to have a high bar. And he said something really interesting. He said, if somebody comes in and tells me I can have more than 10% savings, I know that they're lying and I hang up the phone. I'm paraphrasing, but basically that
yeah,
was what he
I know,
said.
I know.
And I think it's interesting because you're right. You want to say that I could do 10%, but I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet for the maritime
No,
community.
no, no.
I do think there's going to be carbon in propulsion of ships, but it won't be as widespread. I think there'll be some really quick wins, whether it's wind assist, whether it's things like battery for short sea, whether it's nuclear for certain
Nuclear,
things.
exactly that.
Yeah,
Exactly
which
that.
I think I'm a little bit of a skeptic on. I was at a conference and I basically said, wait a minute, like if you have what's going on in the Red Sea, you're going to run a ship that has this type of propulsion, and it was explained. It was explained that it's a different type, but I think there's a place
the
for
salt
all of
reactors
this.
is less dangerous, but
Yeah,
that's a
but
totally
I
different
think
story.
I think that there is a place for all of this, and I think that companies aren't going to come in saying I have one solution, but I got four. I got four solutions that we could actually do without going to a dry dock, maybe a wet dock, and some of it's this, some of it's weather routing, some of it's maybe carbon capture technology, some of it's other stuff that we could put in, and as a aggregate, it could be 12%. Individually, it's a couple percentage each, but let's work it together. We can help improve it. I think that's
Correct.
where digitalization, because it's weather routing and smart routing, along with the physical, like you said, paints and hull scrubbing, are going to have to play a role together.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's no silver bullet. It's a matter of a lot of different elements that has to do it. And there's not one fuel that we all go to and then we solve the problems, but everybody's at least doing something that bring us in the right directions. But there are no silver bullets, and it's a lot of small little initiatives, and we have to pursue all of them and to see how does it work. And in Klaveness, we had this, as I said, this try a little and learn a lot, and I think that's what the shipping industry is doing right now. We're trying to find out what can we do.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the one thing, and this is we could go off this topic forever, is you talk. I think right now in funding of the maritime space of technology, whether it's kind of the hard technology of paint coatings and fuel and other stuff, and then software and the associated technology, is I think there's a dumbbell effect going on. And they used to refer to that within like HR. You would either have really young, under 30, 35, or over 50 set. And you didn't have that middle set for a certain, there was a period where a lot of companies went through that. And what I think is happening in the maritime technology space is you have a dumbbell effect. You either have a whole bunch of startups, right? And in that, there may be these good ideas, or the other one is fail fast, fail often sort of thing. I think it's a similar type of mindset. But to go in and just do that, or you have these bigger companies, which I work for one of them, that are here. And I think we still need a lot of churn for the smaller kind of new companies, whether it's VC, whether it's kind of these other type of incubators that help these companies mature. Because I think there's a lot there that we just haven't seen yet.
No, I totally agree with you, Chris. And when I was living in Singapore not long ago, I was a mentor in what they call Peer 71, and Peer 71 is a government-sponsored program on actually helping startups to see what is the value proposition, how can they fit in, how can they get a proof of concept with some particular owners, and that was extremely interesting. There were so many ideas. And some very good ideas, but obviously they need funding, they need shipping to adapt, and and start using it. But you're right. I mean, we need there's captain stables in Hong Kong, and there's a number of other initiatives where encourage young people to come up with ideas. I was mentoring maritime students in Singapore Management University in terms of digitalization and what's going on, and they get it. I mean, they get it much faster than you and me. And
yeah. They definitely get it, and not only do they get it, the tricky thing is I think they'll have a faster learning curve for the first, I don't want to say 80%, first 60 or 70%. It's going to be, will they have the stick-to-itiveness to stick around for the next 30 to 40%, which will really be the eye opener. I had a guest on, Jeff Wecker from Viterra. He talked about, he goes, operators now could pick it up really fast because everything digital, everything in the front. But I think we still got into the mindset of they don't know everything, and some of those answers aren't digital. It's like knowing the little things. Like, all right, if you go into that port, yeah, it says give notice 72 hours, but give notice 96 hours because that port never responds. Like just those little, like no one's going to put that in a computer, right? Like that's going to be learning. And that gets into like keeping people in the loop, which we go back to like AI and MI.
No, if you look at the world in the Western world today, and we have all been afraid of AI will take over jobs and technology and robots and stuff. And we're shortage of good people. We're shortage of people in general in the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to kind of my next question is when you were mentoring these people in these different arenas, what would you, when they come in, what would you say to them? Or if they look at like, well, listen, I can go work for SpaceX, I could go work for Google, I could go work for a big startup in Asia that's maybe telecom or other things. Like, what would you say, like, hey, come into our little world? Because we're unique in a lot of ways, but I also found that we're unique, yes, but not in every way. What would you tell those folks?
Well, it's interesting because you're right. It was kind of shipping was operating on the rate of for a long time, and most of the time when I've been in the business, COVID changed that. All of a sudden, people found out that logistics was important. You went down to your local IKEA and you want to buy a new sofa. They said, we don't have a sofa.
Yeah.
Said, okay, but when do you get it? They said, we don't know. And then I said, okay, and then I go somewhere else to buy your sofa, and you couldn't find your sofa.
You couldn't find your sofa.
You couldn't find anything.
Toilet paper. When it came down to toilet paper here in the United States, everybody there were people shooting each other, because of toilet paper. And I think that's when I think that one of my earlier guests mentioned the terminology sea blindness. Everybody had this level of sea blindness. Stuff showed up, gasoline at the petrol station. Toilet paper at Walmart. It was there. It was there at 2:00 in the morning. It was there at 2:00 in the afternoon. It didn't matter. It was always there. And I think you're right. I think COVID kind of opened up and more people became interested in it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then the whole logistic, development about, because shipping was not used to disruption, so nobody had any, fallback plans what to do when all of a sudden they couldn't get containers, the ship was not available, the ship was full, the terminals were holding up. Nobody knew what to do, and then that changed also the dynamics in terms of we have to use technology to help us predict, make backup plans, contingency plans. What do we do if this happens? What are our alternatives? This is why you see the liner operators now going in buying airplanes and being airliners, because if you are a factory sitting in Germany producing cars and you can't get your car parts from China, which was the case, you close down the factory. Now the line say, okay, we can offer you to bring it by plane. It costs you a bit more, but you can continue your factory. So it changed people's understanding on logistics and shipping, I think, all this, because it touched all of us somehow, somewhere.
Right. It also showed over time, I mean, especially with the more recent, with the Houthi attacks, how quickly, like everybody thought this was going to be a major problem. Maybe for those dozen ships that got routed, everything else we could just, like you said, maybe use some technology that didn't exist 4 years earlier, or use some systems in place, airlines, other things, alternative sources. There was a lot written a couple of years ago about moving out of China into Vietnam, into the Philippines, into other places that isn't locked into one country, and then maybe distributing those distribution centers to different places where, okay, well, no, we could just absorb that punch differently. Now, again, it comes at a cost, marginal to the consumers, and then it comes at a time, but it won't be anything, I think, like what will happen in COVID, which is kind of interesting.
Exactly that. No, exactly that. So there's a different interest. So that's what I say. That's my story is, shipping is actually the backbone of the world trade. It's the backbone of you getting, you can drink Italian water when you sing in Singapore. You can, or you can get Vietnamese spices on your desk in the UK.
Exactly.
Things we take for granted actually, they come somehow to you. And how is that? That's exactly the whole shipping and logistics.
Exactly. It is really a fascinating part. And as I wrapping up here, I know you're busy, relatively new role, do a little traveling. Are you reading anything? And you don't have to answer that with actually reading a book. You could always go into, I listen to podcasts, I listen to audiobooks, I'm writing a book. I have about 70 guests, and I'd say I have about less than 10% have said they're actually writing something, which is always kind of interesting.
I would love to write a book, but I probably don't have the time right now. I listen to podcasts, and I also listen to some of yours that they are always relevant for what I do. No, I love reading biographies. So right now I'm reading the Barack Obama, The Promised Land.
Okay.
So I just find it, inspiring and fascinating to read about how others have, because, we see them as presidents, or we see them as, have also led the Lee Kuan Yew who established Singapore, and we see them as heroes, and they have their struggles, they have their challenges. Nothing is a straight line in what they do. And it inspires me and it fascinates me, I learn from it, basically, So I like biographies in many ways. I've read Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and these guys who's really successful. They had their struggles too, right?
Have you read the book Shoe Dog about Phil Knight?
No, it's on my list though.
I read that about 6 years ago on a recommendation of a friend of mine. What a great book. Easy read. He talks about, and it's interesting because I think the big parallel, again, we like to think maritime is very unique, very different. It is and it isn't. He talks about his relationships with the suppliers in Japan. And it is a relationship. It's not, and maybe some things have changed, but culturally, I would guess not. But he talks about how building a relationship over time with the Japanese was part of his success and getting into the market. It's fascinating.
Chris, I lived and worked 4 years in Japan. I felt it on my bones, I tell you.
Yeah. I'm sure. So we could talk about that.
And I loved it. I'd love to read that book. So thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, it's very good. It's like I said, it's an easy read. It starts off and every time I put it down, I wanted to go run 5 miles. I mean, I could do it. I'm more of a 3 to 4 mile guy. 5 miles, I'm like, what am I doing this for? Jeez. Good luck to everybody who does that stuff. I'm not a marathon guy. I think the longest I've ever run was maybe 6 or 7 miles. And I was like, I'm not doing that again. So yeah, I like to do my half an hour, 40-minute runs and then have coffee after. That's kind of my
exactly that.
But Frank, this was fantastic. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. I love hearing your experience. Thank you for coming on the podcast there.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.